Hi, I'm David Petersen, the creator of Mouseguard, and this is the creator commentary for Mouseguard, specifically issue number 4, The Dark Ghost, which was later collected in the hardcover Fall 1152. For this issue and the remaining issues in Fall 1152, I'll be doing the commentary as audio only, but please feel free to follow along in your copy of the story, either in issue form or from the hardcover, as I talk about the behind-the-scenes details, art notes, and my headspace as I go page by page and panel by panel. I was writing and drawing this issue in April of 2006 for Archaea. It introduces one of my favorite characters in Mouseguard and his legendary weapon, Kellan Oz and the Black Axe. Because I'd committed to 6 issues for this series, this issue marks being just past the halfway point. The danger was still escalating, but it wasn't too late to introduce an ally. The wraparound cover for this issue shows Kellan Oz's Spartan existence: a plate, fork, a tankard on the mantle, one iron pan, and then, oddly, an overstuffed armchair. There are some bird feathers, grossly underscaled, even for tiny down, poking out as stuffing. On the rear of the cover, Saxon and Kenzie hang upside down, as Luke did in the Wampa Cave in Empire Strikes Back. Another subtle reference is that the silhouette for where the Black Axe should be hung is over Kellan Oz's shoulder. On the inside front cover, the Star Wars-like opening crawl reveals Kellan Oz's name. I mention here that he's an old hermit, and as readers know, he's also a true hero and a guard mouse. His name itself is unusual and made up. It's the names Alec and Ewan spelled backwards. These are the two men who played Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Kellan Oz represents that type of character archetype. The title The Dark Ghost refers to Kellan Oz as the Black Axe, a legend either thought to be myth or dead. The spot illustration of Kellan Oz here has an object behind him, and this was a piece of decorative cast iron from my old job at the architectural antique store that was on display. The last recorded words of the Black Axe at the bottom are a bit of world building. I don't even believe that Kellan Oz is the one who said them. It's meant to preload all the ideas about the power of myth and legend. It also refers to a fact not revealed for another 2 books from this point, that Kellan Oz is known to be dead by Conrad, something I covered in issue 2's commentary. Page 1, panel 1. For this nature panel, to frame the title of the issue, I wanted to toy with what time of day as well as what the natural species was being shown. I settled on ivy and kind of a sunset dusk time of day. Panel 2. Even though I imply that Kellan Oz is old, I wanted to have him still capable of impressive physical tasks, here carrying Saxon and Kenzie as he scales down a tree fungus ladder. Panel 3. I was scouting some reference photos for this issue, and Curse Pirate Girl creator and good friend of mine, Jeremy Bastian, said that his dad's property had some great gnarled old trees on a steep embankment that led down to the Huron River in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where I was working at the time. We went over there after I got out of work, and even though I was used to navigating the woods, the steep pitch of the ground, covered in exposed roots and leaves, and the dense branches made it hard to descend and get photos of the trees. This exterior tree is from that excursion. But while taking a tumbled step, I got poked by a low branch that whipped me in the eye. And after getting back to level ground and looking in a mirror, I thought I was okay. But a few hours later, my eye still didn't feel right, so I made a trip to the ER to discover I'd scratched my cornea. It healed over time, but it was still sore when first waking up and sensitive to light for years after, all because of this panel. Page 2. Kellan Oz is trussing up Saxon and Kenzie. Why? We'll find out soon. On this page and the next page, the question of time comes up, and it's left a little vague about how much time passes between the panels, like 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. In panel 2, the height difference I think of between Saxon and Kenzie, and yet I rarely remember to draw, is actually on display here. Panel 3. I rarely draw a mouse's whiskers, but here I like how the negative space whiskers on Kenzie help depict gravity. Page 3, panel 1. A recreation of the room from the cover here, but from a different angle. And the interior is inspired by the hollowed-out tree home of Sam Gribley, the main character from the book and movie My Side of the Mountain. The thin bent branches contouring the walls, doors, and windows were purely decorative. They don't really serve a function, and I don't know that Kellan Oz would have bothered to interior decorate this place, but I needed something of visual interest. The hammock is there to give further examples of Kellan Oz's austerity when it comes to living and creature comforts. Panel 2, the room from another view as Kenzie wakes up and tries to rouse Saxon. My thinking on the word balloon here is that the smaller the type and the balloon size, the more that character is whispering. Panel 3, a very menacing Kellan Oz here. He's mostly out of view, smoking a pipe, and getting that poker red hot. I see this as posturing alone, but more on that to come. Page 4, Panel 1. As the angry character, Saxon finally gets to wear the angry cat face Liam wore in issue 1. He's also in no position here to talk big, yet, because he's Saxon, he does it anyhow. Panel 2. Kellan Oz puts the poker hairs away from Saxon's nose. Kellan Oz suffers no fools, but he speaks calmly. Panels 3 and 4, now we get to the reasoning behind why a hermit mouse would string up 2 mice who are most likely guard mice. And as the axe is being formally introduced here, I want to point out that fans have asked me, how much lore did I already have in mind for the Black Axe at this point? And most of what is found in the Black Axe book, I already had in my head, specifically that it is a weapon and a title that is secretly passed down, like the Dread Pirate Roberts. Page 5 is a mirrored panel layout of the previous page. Panel 1, Kenzie makes a point here. He also would only assume that the axe Kellan Oz refers to is some kind of utility axe. Panel 2, now Kellan Oz explains that he doesn't trust their mere wearing of cloaks to mean that they are noble guard mice, explaining some of the motive of why he would truss them up. Panels 3 and 4. Here I had trouble with the dialogue. It was a matter of how to transition between Kellan Oz playing close to the vest about who he is and what he's accusing them of, while getting them to eventually catch on, along with the reader. Those of you who have read on in the series know what a colossal secret the Black Axe's identity is, and that he'd reveal that to these 2 mice he thinks may be nothing more than thieves seems unlikely. I never liked the dialogue transition here. But looking back on it now, after also written the Black Axe series, I think I can retcon in some motivations. That axe meant a great deal to Kellan Oz, beyond just a symbol of the legend of the axe. It represents all he lost to wield it. Now, if it's missing, who's to say how open he'd be in an attempt to get it back? Or, in this moment, did he plan to kill them if the axe wasn't returned? I think that's less likely. Or did he plan to rely on the axe lore being a legend, and that even if these 2 mice believed him, if they told anyone, no one would think an old fur like this to be such a hero? Page 6, Panel 1. In my original outline for this issue, only 252 words, I did manage to put in, quote, Saxon says enough, end quote. Panel 2, one of the rare times I show mouse teeth in action. And in Panel 3, I still like this pause in action. It gives some anticipation between Saxon chewing himself free and his eventual charge at Kellan Oz. I'm also still pleased with the way Saxon's cloak is draped over his head. A foolhardy charge on Saxon's part. His hands are still bound, and he doesn't really understand who this mouse is. Quick to act, and with consequences to pay for in the coming pages. Saxon also blurts out his understanding of the lore of the Black Axe as a character. A myth, long since dead. We'll come back to Saxon's view about this in the next issue. Page 7 is a 180-degree rotation of the previous page's panel layout. In Panel 1, my original outline for this issue, the only note here is Saxon and Kellan Oz fight. Panel 2. In fact, this foreshortening of the hot poker and the upcoming fire were written on the fly as I came up with a sequence and knew I needed some dramatic way to time out the battle and the conversation, to get the mice to resolve their dispute due to something more pressing. Panel 3. Another anticipation shot here, as well as a re-establishing shot. Saxon and Kellan Oz are facing off near the fireplace, while Kenzie remains strung up and the poker is sitting on the bare floor. This helps the reader re-understand where everyone is positioned for what's coming up. Panel 4. Kellan Oz reveals a little more. Not only that he was a guard mouse, but that he trained them. And as a knock on the red and blue cloaked mice, that he doesn't feel that they are up to the muster of when he trained mice for service. Page 8. This is an odd and awkward 6-panel layout, one I repeat on the next page too, that makes it very difficult to flow through. You have to read them like 3 vertical columns to get the panel order right. In panels 1, 2, and 3, Kellan Oz explains some of his misgivings about the pair, and why he may not think them trustworthy, as Saxon grabs the closest thing to a weapon he could find and lands a poorly placed hit to Kellan Oz's shoulder armor. Panel 4, here are those consequences, catching fire. In panel 5, Kenzie starts to explain. While he was slower to free himself, his approach was more calm and thought out, trying to use reason to sway Kellan Oz. This is also one of those odd panels you don't ever practice drawing. Your main character tied up, hanging upside down, and using their teeth to unbind their paws. Something to keep in mind for aspiring comic artists. It's not all cool poses and dramatic action or facial expressions. It's stuff you never expected to have to draw. Panel 6. Kellan Oz chooses his weapon. It makes sense if the closest household item to Saxon's missing sword is a fork, then Kellan Oz's black axe is replaced with a frying pan. Page 9, Panel 1. Ouch! Not only is Kellan Oz not convinced, he probably gave Saxon a concussion with that frying pan to the face. As an art note, to get the swish of the pan, I avoided inking the background in those spots. Same goes for Saxon's bloody muzzle. Panel 2, Saxon is noticing the results of knocking that poker away from Kellan Oz, and although of course he would be addressing Kenzie as the only other ally of his in this fight, I think it's interesting on a psychological note that this is probably something Saxon does often when he gets himself in trouble. He has to have Kenzie help him get back out of it. Panel 3, the same size and shape panel as the previous page with the hot poker, and that's to compare apples to apples of how much this blaze has grown. Panel 4, Kenzie gets himself free, and I used a little lettering trick to help show his fall. In panel 5, where did Kenzie pull the map from? I have to assume it's some secret pocket in his cloak. But yes, now that he's explained and Kellan Oz has denied his argument, Kenzie can pull out physical proof. A map of the interior of Lockhaven that is never supposed to see light of day. Panel 6, a close-up of the same map, which I discussed in the first issue's commentary, and my troubles with it. I think I zoomed in on it to make some kind of emphasis, and to eat up one last panel on this oddly stacked page. Page 10. I think because of how densely packed the previous 2 pages were, I opened this up to be a 2-panel page, and in fact, so is the next one as well, to give some breathing room. Perhaps also to show how big the fire has gotten. Panel 1. Why does Kellan Oz still not believe them? Because I came up with this very argument to Kenzie's explanation on the previous page as soon as I'd written that dialogue. It's good to play devil's advocate to tie up logical loopholes that make your characters look like they are either dumb or just following a plot track. Panel 2. This is the first in a 2-panel payoff where Kenzie sets up his argument and Saxon gets at his bindings. This is also a point where I thought about that problem of where did the map come from. I'm trying to show Kenzie placing it back into some secret compartment in his cloak. Over to page 11, where we get the second part of this moment, just seconds later, as Saxon is finally free and Kenzie finishes his thoughts. Panel 2, boy, this tree interior is really on fire. Probably a little unrealistically so. Coupled with the heat and the danger, Kenzie's plea is very persuasive here. I wanted this fire to feel a little bit like how the blaze plays out in Disney's Robin Hood as the battle rages on and the entire castle ends up on fire. Except here it's Kellan Oz suddenly looking around and realizing what's happened to his home. Page 12, the halfway point of the issue, and it's time for a scene change. To help make that obvious, I changed the color palette. Panel 1, an establishing shot to hopefully show that we are now somewhere else, totally different, and that in comparison to that fallen tree, the mice are very, very small. The background is another example of where I hatched in all the negative space rather than the positive shape of the trees and foliage. Panel 2, we zoom in a little bit closer, and the dialogue helps orient where we are, leading to panel 3, closer still, enough to now see the armor of the Axe Army Rebellion group from issue 3, and hopefully eagle-eyed readers spotted that Liam is in the very back of this battalion. Page 13 is a 90-degree rotation of the previous page's panel layout. Panel 1, here between this coloring, the shifty eye, and the dialogue, readers hopefully now know that this is Liam. Panel 2, the coward line here was in my original draft of the outline for the issue. There isn't usually a lot of dialogue in my outline, so the fact that we've had a couple instances of dialogue making it into the outline and also making it directly into the issue is kind of rare. Panel 3. Here in that same outline, I had Liam finding an opportunity to wander off. The question mark, exclamation point, word balloon is the start of that, something I'll talk more about on the next page. As an art note, on this page, every inked line that isn't a character or a panel border is a color hold, a technique where I paint over the line work to something other than black. This was a lot of work for me at that point in my career. I didn't have a process streamlined like I do now, so anywhere the black line of a character touches a background purpley line, I had to digitally go in there and make that distinction. However, I'm glad that I did it. I think the softness and depth of field I'm able to get in these pages is something that really helps the atmosphere of these scenes, and, as fans will know, is something I've certainly experimented with and developed more throughout the series. Page 14, Panel 1. The opportunity to slip away comes to Liam when he gets a landmark to know where he is. This was something that came to me as I was drawing out the scene and trying to think of an interesting visual or background in the moment. Liam wanders off. That little bit of woven hat marking the burial of the merchant ties back to issue 1. I didn't know if I needed to have Liam spell it out here, but I opted to be better safe than sorry. Panel 2, speaking of spelling it out, as Spartan on dialogue as Fall is, I may have overwritten Liam's thoughts here. Panels 3 through 5, and with a quip to himself about the possible usefulness of a snake, Liam disappears into the woods. There's an odd thing happening here with the color holds in this sequence, and if I ever get a chance to remaster Fall, I'd fix these 3 to be a little less hazy and blotchy, and just allow the distance to fade. Page 15. This is a 180-degree rotation from the previous layout. Panels 1 through 3, Liam is ready to shed any affiliation with that group. He ditches his armor and his spear. Perhaps this is foolish, as in panel 3, we see the Axe Army returning behind him. Panel 4, not only do these axe mice, or I guess spear mice, know that Liam wandered off from their march, they now also realize who he is in the larger picture. And in a sense of bravado, Liam taunts them a bit. Panel 5, I was certainly still learning the body language of how to show a mouse do things, like suddenly duck. This was hard to do and it took some work. Liam must have rolled his dice well because neither spear actually touches him, and both get embedded in the tree. Page 16, panels 1 through 3, in a moment to rival his snake moment from number 1, Liam snaps off the end of the spearheads to use them as little throwing daggers. This moment was all written on the fly, knowing I needed a logical way for this to play out, asking myself questions like, how would the soldiers react if they not only found a deserter, but that he was also a guard mouse? And then, how would Liam react? Would he just take getting dragged off or killed? It was my answers to those questions that framed out this sequence. Panel 4. Despite Liam's brave attempt, he is pummeled with the spear handles, and it seems the beating only may stop because one soldier greedily realizes there may be something in it for him to spare Liam. As an art note, I'm still proud of how graphic the Axe Army's armor is, and that when it's cast off on the ground, these simple black shapes read as cast-off armor, and were an interesting, repetitious form to be able to lead the reader's eye through the panel. Page 17. As Liam is forced along in a half Nelson, the The bottom panel reveals the great meeting place for all these disgruntled and organized mice. I wanted to show that there were a lot of them too, more than what we saw at Barkstone in issue 3. A movement larger than one town. It's also hard to tell, but the fallen tree is supposed to be on the bank of some murky pond, and that the top half of that tree is submerged. Along with the cool colors, the swampy location, a dead tree providing a cave-like dwelling, and a cultish-like following of armed mice. This is supposed to be a scary moment building up. Who is inside of this log? Page 18. The first 2 panels on this page zoom in as though we, the reader, are standing still as the mice approach us. The last panel is a reverse view, and we see what they see. Liam's scrappy dialogue here is something I normally would give to Saxon, but as I needed to flesh out Liam here, I had to have him say them, but hopefully in a way that was a bit funnier and less angry than Saxon would have. That might be one of those things that in my head, because I know Liam's personality, I read them that way. But I don't know how well that plays off for someone who's just reading these characters for the first time. Page 19. The original outline for this scene took place inside of a tent. But the dark hollow log, I felt played so much better. Panel 1 is essentially the same as the last panel on the previous page. And then in panel 2, we get a reply and a vague silhouette. I can't remember if I inked in the entire center of the log hollow and then used white to draw back in the shape, or if I just inked around as I went. In panel 3, the villain steps a little closer. Hopefully the visual here is clear enough to tie together Conrad's flashback moment from issue 2. And the dialogue in this panel is, again, directly from the outline. Something I've said a number of times about this issue, but rarely happens in practice most of the time. And now, with all of this slow, plodding, drawn-out anticipation of the villain reveal, we turn to page 20. Panel 1. Here I had to figure out how to continue to draw Midnight as a silhouette so that I wasn't revealing him, but also not make him look foolish like some two-dimensional design. It was hard. Here, Midnight's hands are rendered and more three-dimensional, while the rest of him is still a flatter outline. Panel 2. Here's where I really struggled with how to reveal Midnight in terms of the story. How do I have Liam know, but not the reader? Midnight's dialogue here is supposed to be very much a join me and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son type moment. In panel 3, with an axe to his neck, Liam says no. I always wished I'd had more of a moment to pause there, for that reply not to come so easily. Not because he's tempted, but because he stands to be beheaded if he does not agree. Panel 4, realizing exactly that, I'd gotten Liam into a position where I needed him to stand on his conviction and stop masquerading as an Axe Army soldier at the threat of beheading. When he says no, how do I not follow through? And here Midnight starts to explain that he should do those things. And then on page 21, in panel 1, he explains why he'd rather wait. Now, I'd written this as a way to get myself out of the conundrum that I had just put myself in, but I realized as I was writing it that it was a better example of showing Midnight as a villain, what lengths he would go to get his side to win, what cruelty he was capable of. And in panel 2, we have the unmasking and reveal of Midnight to Liam, with Midnight's dialogue trailing off so that in panel 3, Liam can finish the sentence. And I didn't want the audience to know at this point, only to be given the information that Liam knows, something I'll talk more about in the next issue's commentary. Panel 4. Whoops, the scale on that log opening versus the size of the mice sure changed. But I still like that the mice are negative space in the black ink of the hollow's darkness, and you can read their body language perfectly. Page 22, back to Saxon, Kenzie, and Kellan Oz. In panel 1, This is how to resolve what could be a massive forest fire I had no intent of taking the time for the mice to fix or even contemplate. Rain. My plan was to have most of issue 5 take place in the rain, so using that as a way to justify that Kenzie, Saxon, and Kellan Oz would walk away from this was really convenient. Just start the rain a little early. The rain was achieved by inking it on a separate sheet so that I could easily isolate that ink work and reverse it to be light instead of dark, and then also make it semi-transparent on top of the rest of the drawing. I also think that after the eye injury I described at the start of this issue to collect the reference for this tree, I had fun burning this tree down and having the trio watch it burn. Panel 2. Kenzie makes a big promise here. Since he does not know anything about the rebellion being axe-themed, he's gambling that after stopping a revolt, he can still recover Kellan Oz's axe. My way of justifying it looking back is that, as he said in his agreement to Kellan Oz, that the mice who would lead a revolt against the guard are also the same type of mice that would steal that axe. Page 23, panel 1. The dialogue here has caused some confusion from fans. It belongs to Saxon, and is a continuation of him saying Kenzie in the last panel. While Saxon is based on some of my worst personality flaws, I do have a terrible sense of direction, but I didn't give that to Saxon. I thought the idea of giving him the ability to track, something that relies on subtle observation, it felt like the right skill to give him to balance him out and offset that anger and that hostility. His normal, very bold way of acting. It's something I haven't really ever come back to other than in the RPG, but would like to. As an art note for this page, I had fun trying to figure out how to show a trampled, muddy ground at mouse scale, and probably overworked the inks on the ground level, especially in the top panel where we're supposed to maybe be seeing footprints. I think they're a little too vague, and I could have done a better job of illustrating that. Panel 2, Kenzie finishes off Saxon's thought, pointing to a wet, uninviting landscape where an army is already ahead of them in an effort to overthrow their order. At just past the halfway point for this series, I've placed my characters in positions that were hard to get out of. Liam is captured and being threatened as an example killing. Saxon and Kenzie are weaponless, behind the force on their way to attack the guard, and their only new asset is an old mouse who, if he is who he says he is, doesn't have the one thing that makes him a legend. Oh, and it's raining. Page 24, or in the back of the book if you have the hardcover, is the pinup by Mark Smiley. Mark was the founder of Archaea and was the president of the company at that time. He also had a beautiful, though mature audience-only, watercolored comic called Artesia. I asked Mark if he'd do a pinup of Kellan Oz, the Black Axe, during his prime. I've always loved the way Mark depicted armor, and this piece, which the original is proudly in my collection, does not disappoint. And that's the 4th issue of Mouse Guard. It has been collected in fall 1152, published by Archaea. If you've enjoyed this commentary, please leave comments in the section below. Let me know what I didn't answer for you in this issue, and subscribe for updates when I add more Mouse Guard commentary. Thank you for listening.